What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture, it's a place of history, it's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution
for the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg for me is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment, what I saw these young African Americans doing, was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium. A jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the Cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One-Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars and poets know that this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Leslie Ann Murray. I run Brown Girl Book Lovers, where we interview writers and review books, and interview primarily Black writers and writers of color. And I'm so glad I have the opportunity to be here again. Today we have our debut writers panels, and I love debut writers panels because we can talk about so many things: the books, craft. How does it feel to be a new writer, right? And celebrate in this newness. The two writers we have today are Diana Richards, and Aaliyah Bilal. I'm gonna read Diana bio. Welcome. Diana is the executive director of the Harlem Writers Guild and a writer, playwright, and music producer. She's also a singer who cut her own album in the 1980s and performed backup for Whitney Houston, y'all. Like Ella, Diana won a talent competition that launched her career singing Watch What Happens, a song made famous by Ella Fitzgerald. She lives in New York City. You can clap, yeah. Aaliyah Bilal was born and raised in Prince George's County, Maryland. She has degrees from Oberlin College and the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. She's published stories, essays with the Michigan Quarterly Review and the Rumpus. Thank you all. We will have Diana read first.
On. Can you hear me? Oh, good afternoon, Harlem. First of all, I want to thank the Schomburg for inviting me to this, to me, and for the Harlem Writers Guild, a historic occasion on this debut book, Ella, a novel. I want to thank Joy Bivens and Novella Ford and all the staff and the Harlem Writers Guild. This segment that I am going to read, I picked it because we're in Harlem, and it mentions one incredible Harlem institution, and you'll recognize it when I get to it. Let me give you a little background. Ella, at this time in the book, the chapter is called Fresh Pennies, Eyes Like Fresh Pennies. There was a character that I developed named Suki Cabell, and I named him after Cab Calloway because in my mind he had all the dash and the flavor of Cab Calloway. Heidi, Heidi, Heidi Ho. You guys remember that? The Heidi Ho man. So Suki Cabell, but he was a numbers runner. And at this time in the novel, Ella has left Yonkers. A lot has transpired, traumatic for her. We're in the Great Depression. There is a need for money. She needs money. She has gone to live with her Aunt Virginia in Harlem. And her Aunt Virginia was struggling to pay the rent. And she looked about and she saw that there was number running in Harlem, and people were making a lot of money. So she wanted to be a numbers runner. So that's where we are. She had convinced a young man named Woofy to please introduce me to this man, Suki Cabell. Also, she had seen Suki zipping in and out of barbershops, looking wonderful, dashing, always about town. And so she wanted to meet him, and she convinced Woofy, I can be a numbers runner. And Woofy said, no, that's for men. And Ella said, no, I can be a numbers runner. So that's where we're at. You with me? Okay. That Saturday, Ella must have changed clothes 5 times before she felt comfortable in a simple tan skirt and white blouse. Only after she was on the street heading toward the pool hall did she realize that she was wearing Suki's colors. That was a wonderful sign, she decided. When she arrived, Suki was in the middle of a pool game against a husky man in a stunning gray suit. A huge black fedora shaded his face, and he wore shiny patent leather shoes. He was frowning at Suki, who breezily knocked one ball after another into the pocket. He was, as usual, clad impeccably in cream. Most of the people in the pool hall were dressed in fedoras, silk suits, and signature gaiter shoes. A handful of women in glittering skirts perched on stools around different pool tables. The women laughed and waved their hands about, but didn't seem to speak much. Ella presented herself at Suki's pool table. He didn't notice her at first, and then that smile, deliberate, barely touched the corners of his lips. And as if in answer, there was that feeling in Ella again, a tingling sensation in her belly, a rush of happiness, a longing to pull herself up to him and align her body next to his, from the very top of her head to the soles of her feet, and stay there forever. Suki hit the 8-ball, and all eyes were fixed on its roll into the pocket. The onlookers roared. Suki's opponent hollered, "That ain't right, man. You can't win no 3 games in a row." "Relax," Suki said, racking his cue. "We don't have no beef. You can pay me when you have it. We sweet." Then he turned to Ella. "Ella, hello there, sassy feet." He remembered her, and she loved it. She didn't immediately register that the black fedora man now had his hand on Suki's shoulder and was spinning him around, yelling, "No, nigga, what you know? You using hoodoo or something?" Suki didn't waste time. He didn't even talk. He reached for the pool cue he just racked and knocked the fedora off the man's head with one hand as he broke the cue across the man's head with the other. The man stumbled back and grabbed his head. Women screamed. Seconds later, spider lines of blood snaked down the man's arm. A big man who looked like a bouncer pulled him away, sat him down in a corner. Suki stood there, holding one end of the pool cue, observing. Once the man was seated, Suki said to Ella, seemingly without any concern, "Come on, let's blow this joint." He strolled out, no blood on him, although now the man in the corner had it dripping onto his collar. Stunned, Ella followed. Perhaps Wolfie was right. She had no idea what she was getting herself into. Suki was more than a suave dancer, a sharp dresser, or a captivating man. He was lethal. He just didn't look it. The air was sunny, fragrant with oncoming spring. Suki strolled up Lenox Avenue, took Ella's arm as if they were on a date. "I hear you want to get into the game. Tell me why." Ella was caught off guard. She'd been thinking about the fight in the pool hall and then focusing on the feel of her hand tucked against his bicep, his nearness. "I'm hungry," she said. "That's why. If you're not hungry, this isn't the racket for you. It's no fool's business. You could get killed or worse." Ella suspected that Suki wanted her to ask what was worse than being killed. Oh, God, let me move along. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Sr., the pastor, was revered only in Harlem but throughout the country. People said that in his church, one not only heard the voice of God, you also heard what foolishness man was getting himself into. The first time that Ella accompanied her aunt and cousin, one man stood out, tall with conked hair. Something about the way he swaggered down the aisle and his purple suit and huge lavender fedora made him seem wickedly alive. One of the ushers followed him, asked him to take off the hat, and Ella glimpsed gold cuff links. "Okay, he looks like the devil. Is he rich?" "You bet he is," Georgie said. "He probably is the devil for sure." I had to skip. I couldn't finish it. I wanted to get to Abyssinian Baptist Church, where the man in a lavender suit was sitting in the pews looking like the devil, and he, in fact, was the numbers runner's boss. But maybe next time, get the book. It's wonderful. I don't usually say that something is great, but I just love the devil sitting up in Abyssinia.
Good afternoon. I'm going to read from the opening of Woman in Niqab. The day after my return home from Egypt, I sat with my mother and her sister Linda, telling them about my time over there. I mentioned things I thought they wanted to hear. The Sphinx, I told them, wasn't as big as it looked in the glossy magazines. Compared to the Great Pyramids on the far side of Giza, it was kind of petite with round, nubile features. The atmosphere was light, except for prayer times when the adhan would drift up from 1,000 minarets and hover in mid-air like a chorus of ghosts. The cities were filled with happy sounds, children laughing in the streets, the striking of hand drums, and the rhythmic clapping of distant celebrations. All of it was covered in a haze of golden dust that primed everything for memory, like the sepia tinge of old photographs. We were in the temple after the Friday prayer. We sat at the end of a long table in the downstairs multipurpose room, eating the roast beef, stewed cabbage, and apple cobbler the kitchen sisters worked all morning to prepare. My mom and aunt ate their food as I went on, looking up occasionally to show they weren't ignoring me. "That all sounds very interesting, Imani," Aunt Linda said, "but I want to know the real story, like that right there." She pointed a plastic fork at my uncovered hair. "Is that something you picked up while you were in Cairo?" It was an interesting question coming from her. Temple women had certain standards of dress that my aunt barely fit. She had pretenses to good taste, though her clothes always made her look like a Midwestern stage mom. Her version of covering involved stuffing her dyed blonde hair into a bedazzled baseball cap, which she wore along with shimmery tracksuits. Her lips were always painted fire engine red, a big taboo, and she never removed the polish from her claw-length nails at prayer times, as was the custom. My mother played by the rules, donning West African head wraps and floor-length skirts under loose-fitting tunics. It might have been something to quarrel over, but Aunt Linda was a full decade older than her, and as with most things between them, the younger rarely said a contrary word. The truth was that Aunt Linda didn't expect real answers when she asked kids questions, and while I was 17, a rising senior in high school and not quite a child anymore, I knew my aunt wouldn't care about my reasons. My mind was made up. I was determined to stop covering, and there wasn't anything she or my mom could do about it. Thank you.
Hello? Oh, it's on. Hi, everyone. Thank you both for reading, and thank you both for your book and your contribution to arts and letters. My first question is, I want you to tell us about using fiction to chronicle or highlight the interior life of Ella and American Muslims.
Okay. American Muslims?
No, Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh, okay. Well, I did the research around Ella's life, and I looked at videos, I read books, I read her official biographies, non-official biographies, and I thought about what was it like to be a young black girl in Depression eras during the Harlem Renaissance. How does it feel for a young black girl with dreams whose mother told her, you can do whatever you want to do, and suddenly her mother dies, so she's an orphan. It's the Depression. The racism is everywhere. She can't even buy ice cream on 125th Street. So I gathered those kinds of facts, and then I set them aside and began to really feel what it was like, how I reimagined it was like for her to navigate that set of circumstances. So that is how I used the facts, and then I let it go, having that information, and dealt with the feelings. How does it feel? How does it feel?
Thank you so much. Aaliyah?
Well, growing up Muslim myself, I'd always longed to see stories about people who'd come through this experience. My grandparents converted to the Nation of Islam in the late 1950s. And through my university education, I'd read a good amount of nonfiction on the subject. There's a lot of academic nonfiction, some journalistic nonfiction, and memoir. But I'd never read about this world in an imagined way. And that longing just turned into an ambition to write these kinds of stories myself.
Thank you so much. You know, when you were both of you, while you were talking, I was thinking about the importance of Black writers using fiction to really tell our stories, to really tell our history, because so much of our history is fragmented, has been erased due to transatlantic slave trade, et cetera, and I love when we use this imaginative element of fiction and history to merge those two worlds together to kind of bring about a new history, if I might say. Can you speak on that?
How to bringing about a new history.
Not a new history, or bringing about a new idea, a new concept, right? Because so many of our history is erased. So in that writing of that fiction piece and merging it with history, like the Nation of Islam, right, and bringing this like fictional element, we're telling this nuanced new story.
Or even misremembered.
Yes.
I feel that, you know, my experience growing up was not what the American media tries to convince everybody it is. I didn't grow up in a space where I was taught to hate people for their race. And I do know that that is a component of the Nation of Islam and its ideology. However, first I grew up Sunni, but even I didn't ingest those kinds of messages from my grandparents who were in the nation, or my aunts and uncles who were raised in the nation. And so part of the work of Temple Folk has been about remembering this history and trying to impart these stories in a way that it helps reconfigure people's imagination around this movement, because indeed there was a lot of harm that was inflicted on the members, but there were many contributions that it made, not just within Black America, but to the larger American society.
I also would like to say that it's a rebirth of what happened. Telling Ella's story is a rebirth of her spirit, of what she accomplished in that set of circumstances, because we have short attention spans, and doing it through fiction, we can go for the heart of the matter. We can go for the soul of the matter and express more than in facts. We get an interpreter, which is us, the writers, to possibly even delve deeper into the cause, the agony, the despair, the hope, and the tenacity to overcome any obstacles in our way.
Diana, I liked how you talked about before of like you're reading all the history of Ella Fitzgerald, and then you like put it away and you let it sit in your body. And when you're sitting in your body, that's when you begin to write. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I love the way you said that, Leslie Ann. Sitting in my body, that's exactly it. Because a lot of writers, and you probably have experienced this too, after we begin to write.
Put the mic closer. Put the mic closer.
Okay, after we begin to write, the characters say, listen, this is my story. And then the characters go and tell their own story. Because I have let the character sit in my body and I have suppressed my consciousness and let the character tell the story. I have been called a voice writer, and I do believe that, by more than one person. So it feels good because, in a sense, it feels authentic. That this is authentic when I don't manipulate. And there's two processes of writing. One is just writing and the other is editing. It doesn't happen in the editing as much as when it comes out organically.
Aaliyah, how did your characters sit in your body to come out on the page?
My writing process is a little bit different. I feel that I am supremely in control of the voices and the characters. They are figments of my imagination. They're an amalgamation. They're just words on the page. You know, I do not feel inhabited by characters. It's my job as the writer to make the reader feel as if they are having a believable experience with a fully realized person, but it is just a figment of the imagination. So that language of being inhabited doesn't really resonate with my process. It's my job to imagine the person, so I am completely in control.
I like that. I've never heard a writer talk about it like that, because usually when writers are talking about writing, they're always linking it to this spiritual practice of being overtaken by a character and voice. So I really like that idea. It's very new. I want us to talk about like the interior lives of Black women, right? Because in both of your books, well, for Ella, it's the interior life of Ella Fitzgerald, a Black woman, right? And we have all the nuance with it. And in your short story collection, there are lots of interior life of Black women there. And I just love how you're able to, all these Black women in the book are very nuanced and different. And I just love that coming to the page. So can you talk more about that, and why is it important to structure that?
Okay. I am a Black woman, so instantly I identify. And I relate to the time period of Black women being discriminated against and being the help, only being able to get certain kinds of jobs, not taken seriously. Not only are we Black, but we're women, second class. And we've been told for centuries that we're less desirable, we're mules, workhorses, we're strong, all of this stuff. What about the tender, vulnerable parts of Black women? Don't get me started on this, okay? We are strong, but we are strong for reasons where we're so strong we don't even feel. That's not where we want to go. And there is anger. And guess what? I'm not ashamed of being angry. As a Black woman, I have a lot to be angry about. But what do I do with that anger? I do what Ella did. She said, and this is her quote, "Just don't stop doing what you really want to do. Where there is love and inspiration, I don't see anything wrong with it." And I get chills when I say this. So I'm going to stop.
Preach, preach.
I think the motivation to write well-rounded women characters for me comes from my survey of the kind of texts that have been available about the African American Muslim experience, visual and literary, and most of them tend to be these hagiographies of these central black male figures. And so how many books have we all read about our beloved Malcolm X? How many books have we read about Elijah Muhammad or Muhammad Ali? And so these are the kinds of people whose stories we see recycled over and over again. If you're consuming an African American Muslim story, it's probably about one of these men. And it was my desire to sort of make a statement and say, hey, you know, we're here and we have interesting stories to tell as well.
And I think that's why your book is so impactful and has won many awards and people keep coming to it, right? Because, well, as I was telling you, the language is so beautiful. It's so meditative, but also we are seeing these interior lives, right? And I love that, like, you know, I read this review that says, like, you put them on the page for, even though they have like ugliness and goodness, and it's just this balance for us not to judge, but see, and to see that nuance, which I really appreciated. As this is a debut panel, and I know when I love to go to debut panels, and when people come, we want to hear about like your writing craft, right? And why do you write, right? Because we want to be inspired by you. So I'm interested in hearing about your writing craft in terms of point of view, style, structure. Yeah, you would like to get started, Aaliyah?
Okay. I like to write on demand. In other words, I don't depend on how do you feel? Do you feel like writing? Just write on demand. In other words, that was something, because life is going to get in. Life is going to get in, so it's daily writing or reading. And I think it's important to stay physically fit and to guard your health and to guard your mental health also, and to keep your stress levels in check. Because if your life is crazy, it may be hard. May be hard for me to stop. And I do prayer and meditation also. I do that every day with my coffee, and then I write, and I get ideas all the time, Leslie Ann. I get them all the time, and I should really write every time I get an idea. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, one last thing. Every 2 weeks, I meet with the Harlem Writers Guild, so there is no excuse. And we get together and study, and we read, and we share each other's writings. So that is something that anchors me.
Thank you.
I only tend to write when I have something to say. And so writing every day is not a part of my practice, and it's not anything that if a writer tells me, you know, I've not been very productive recently, that's nothing to get disheartened about. The work is just probably not ready. I think it's more important for me to be reading constantly than to be writing constantly, and then to be reading things that are truly excellent. But I love your comments, Diane, about the spiritual aspects of writing, because I do think that is where emerging writers should focus their attention. You know, what are the stressors on your life that might be keeping you from writing? I take writer's block very seriously. This is my last point. And what I often try to remind people of is that the work may be trying to come to you, but what are the factors in your life that are keeping you from, maybe you're in the wrong city, maybe you're in the wrong marriage. You know, any of these things, if they shift, you may find yourself blossoming in your writing. So it's very important to take care of your heart, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you talk about reading, because I've become a better writer by reading, and reading just like everything, especially when I'm interviewing writers. I'm constantly reading, and sometimes I ask writers questions and they're like, that's a good question. I'm like, really? Where did that come from? But I think it's just by reading and thinking about the words, the stories, what are they trying to do? I'm always trying to figure out, what are you trying to do as a writer to communicate to me? Because writing is a form of communication, right? It is communication. And that has helped me to be also a more passionate writer. I think when I was younger, I'm like, that book ain't good, that ain't good. And now I'm like, you know what? Once you write a book, it's good because you committed to that practice, which is really important. So thank you for saying this. I'm gonna ask one more question, and we're just gonna open it up to the floor. This year, I'm asking every writers about creating dangerously, right? So Edward Danticat, whom I love, wrote this book about the power of Black writers, immigrant writers, to create dangerously, right? And I just want to know, how are both of you creating dangerously?
Me? Okay. First of all, how dare I write a historical fiction on Ella Fitzgerald, the great icon? How dare you do that? That is, I felt like that was quite bold to take up and put myself in that position. The other part is there's so much I would love to be dangerous about. Oh, can you imagine? I look like it, right? I look like, I sound like it. I would like to do it, and I would probably do it under another name. So that I could like take the filters off, forget about it. I don't want any critics and I don't care what you say. So I would love to do it. I'm apt to do it. I'm apt to do it. I love it. There's so much I want to say and describe and create a whole different world. And not get, that's enough. Because, see, I will start to get in there.
Thank you.
Yes. Within empire, such as the one in which we live, it's always going to be frowned upon to love vulnerable people out loud. And so just loving Black people, loving Palestinian people, loving Jewish people, loving anybody is always going to be frowned upon within or by the imperial gaze. And so just being a person, a minoritized person, loving myself is already dangerous. But if I don't, then I make myself less than human. And so I don't feel I or any of us have a choice. Because while we have been minoritized, we are fully human, whether or not empire chooses to recognize that. And so I don't know how you can deny your full humanity. It's part of the joy of living is standing up in yourself. That's the challenge that we all face. How do I become myself? How do I fully become myself? And for instance, may I say one little thing? When all of this going on in the Middle East started happening, I felt so horrible in my heart because I thought, how can people condone the deaths of innocents? And I made a decision to speak out about it and to do so in a way where I was not re-invoking any sort of anti-Semitic tropes, because anti-Semitism is real. So how do we avoid that, but also say Palestinians are human beings and deserve their lives, deserve full, dignified, beautiful lives like all of us. And when I was very afraid to make the statement, but when I made it, I felt restored in my humanity. And it was such a beautiful feeling. For all of the enemies that statement might have made me, I felt, dear God, I deserve my place on the earth at least today. And I think that's the way we should all want to feel.
Thank you both. Wow. Please come up and ask a question. I think we have mics over there. Oh, I love enthusiasm. Go for it.
You all mentioned the importance of reading, right? I'd like to ask the author of Temple Folk, has she read all the other National Book Award finalists that were with her?
I've read as much as I can because my reading schedule is so intense. There are so many amazing books, lots of books that did not make the long list or the finalist list, and so I'm making my way through. But I have read as many as I can, and I will continue. I will continue, of course.
Oh, hi. I had more of a comment for both of you than a question, in that I'm a teacher and teach reading and writing, and it's so inspiring to hear you both with such different writing processes and being so successful with that. It's something that's very hard to hold on to as a teacher, to say you all have your own process and how do we figure that out. I also appreciate that you continue to write books that allow everyone to be seen.
Hello. So this is a question. It's right here. Sorry, hi. I was listening to both of you, Aaliyah and Diane, talk about your different styles of writing, kind of, and the question that came up for me was, how was writing healing for you, or writing this, did it transform you in any way in who you are, what you were looking for, or even the process of becoming, right? Aaliyah, you stated you didn't see a lot of literature about women in the Nation of Islam and just like what a story would look like. And Diane just talking about stepping in and embodying Ella and being free, right? Just to be yourself. And in these processes of creating this, how has that transformed you? How has it moved you, healed you?
Thank you.
I was the firstborn, so I got to get used to being. I've been on this journey for a long, long time. I love that you asked that question. One of my mentors, I discovered early on that I'm a writer not because I love to write or I want to write or this. I have to write. I have to write. When I write, I have better mental health. You know what I'm talking about, right? I have better mental health. So getting to this point of having a book traditionally published on a major publisher, I'm happy, I'm thrilled. Has it changed me? No. Has it enriched me? Yes. And I want more. I have taken on some elements, characteristics of Ella. I love what that woman did. Her dream. And there are words that are not just my imagination. When you listen to Ella's documentaries, when you hear her voice, she was tenacious. She dreamed. How dare a young black woman in the 1930s, Depression era, an orphan, put into a reform school? How dare she become the first lady of song? So she is an inspiration for all of us, and she inspires me personally that if it's something that I love to do and want to do, just don't quit. And that's my message to everybody here. Don't quit. Keep on keeping on. And one of the things Ella said was, I just kept on. Thank you.
I want to clap every time you speak. In my case, I am someone, and I don't know if you can relate, but I just didn't feel that I was a presence in the world because there was no art reflecting me back to myself. I'd always try to see something of myself in the kind of offerings, the artistic offerings in the culture, and would get a little close, but not close enough. And it just made me feel like a non-presence in the world and a non-presence in my own life. And so writing Temple Folk in many ways, it was an act of self-creation. I just had this deep, deep longing to finally inhabit the world, to find a place in people's imaginations, so that they know, like, we're not just bean pies and bow ties, you know? We live in the culture in so many different ways. Not all of us cover, not all of us relate to Islamic theology the way you might presume. And I'm very happy now. I'm happier now. But there are always new questions and new frustrations. It's the fountain of new work, so.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah, we can lift it up. Friends, book lovers, I just want to thank both of the writers for coming here. This was such a beautiful conversation. I think what we can surmise from this conversation is the importance of carving out your own position in the world. And if the book, you don't see the book that you want to represent you, write the book, right? Thank you all. The authors will be signing outside, and thanks. That's it.